The train station was loud with movement, but quiet in meaning. People rushed past each other, eyes glued to screens, hearts sealed behind impatience. Among them stood Ethan Walker, a U.S. Army staff sergeant, waiting for train 417. He wore simple civilian clothes, faded jeans, boots worn from years of service, and a dark jacket zipped halfway up. No medals. No uniform. Just a man carrying a backpack that held more memories than clothes. Ethan had just completed his final deployment. 12 years of service. 2 combat tours. More sacrifices than he could count. He boarded the train and found an empty seat near the middle car. As he placed his backpack carefully beneath the seat, a sharply dressed woman across the aisle sighed loudly. "Excuse me," she said, her tone cutting. "Can you move that bag? This isn't a storage unit." Ethan immediately adjusted it. "Sorry, ma'am." But her irritation didn't fade. "You people always travel like this?" she muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Taking space, no awareness. A few passengers glanced over. Some smirked. Others looked away. Ethan stayed silent. In the army, he had learned something early. Not every insult deserves a response. The train lurched forward, metal grinding softly as it picked up speed. Outside the windows, the city blurred into gray streaks. Minutes passed. Then the woman spoke again. "You know," she said mockingly, eyeing his boots, "if you're going to dress like that, at least act civilized." Ethan slowly looked up. "I'm just heading home," he said calmly. She laughed. "Sure you are." That was when an older man nearby leaned forward. "Leave him alone," he said quietly. The woman scoffed. "Mind your business." Ethan lowered his gaze again. He had faced gunfire, explosions, loss. This was noise. The train entered a long tunnel. Lights flickered briefly. No one paid attention at first. Then came the smell. Burnt plastic. Ethan's eyes lifted instantly. His posture changed, not visibly to most, but enough to matter. Training took over. The lights flickered again. This time, longer. A loud bang echoed from the rear car. The train shuddered. Passengers gasped. An announcement crackled through the speakers, distorted and rushed. "Attention, passengers. Please remain seated. We are experiencing a technical." The system cut out. Smoke began to creep along the ceiling. Panic spread faster than fire ever could. People stood, shouted, grabbed bags. The woman who had mocked Ethan froze, fear washing over her face. Ethan stood up. "Everyone stay calm," he said, voice steady but strong. No one listened at first. Then another jolt. A child's screamed. Ethan moved fast. He pushed toward the rear car, tying his jacket around his face. Smoke thickened as he advanced. Inside, sparks burst from an electrical panel. A conductor lay on the floor, unconscious. Ethan didn't hesitate. He checked breathing, lifted the man with practiced precision, dragged him to safety. He located the emergency extinguisher and aimed low short bursts, controlled. The fire slowed. The smoke thinned. Passengers watched in stunned silence as one man who minutes ago had been ridiculed took control. Ethan turned back, toward them. "Follow me. One line, no pushing." This time, they listened. The woman stared at him, eyes wide. Her voice was gone. Sirens wailed in the distance as the train finally came to a controlled stop. Everyone was alive. Everyone was safe. As emergency crews boarded, applause broke out, soft at feast, then thunderous. Ethan stepped back, pulling his jacket down, ready to disappear again. The woman approached him, trembling. I didn't know," she whispered. Ethan met her eyes, calm and kind. "You didn't have to," he said, "because heroes don't need recognition. They only need the moment to act, and this was only the beginning." The train station slowly returned to normal. But the people who had been on train 417 knew something had changed inside them. Ethan Walker stood near the platform exit, watching emergency crews finish their work. He didn't wait for thanks. He didn't look for cameras. That had never been his way. A firefighter approached him and extended a hand. "You saved lives today." Ethan shook it briefly. "Just did what I was trained to do." But word was already spreading. Passengers whispered to each other, replaying the moment when chaos turned into control, when fear met calm leadership. Someone had posted a short video online. It showed Ethan moving through smoke, giving instructions, carrying the unconscious conductor. By the time Ethan stepped outside the station, the clip had already begun its quiet journey across the internet. He didn't know that yet. What he did know was that his phone was vibrating. A message from his sister. "Saw something on the news." "What, that you?" Ethan stopped walking. "News." He exhaled slowly and typed back, "I'm okay. On my way home." Across the street, the woman from the train stood hesitating. She had followed him out, her face pale, her confidence gone. She finally gathered the courage to speak. "I judged you," she said softly. "I spoke without knowing who you were." Ethan met her eyes. "I've been judged before," he said calmly. "It passes." "But you didn't have to help," she insisted. "After what I said," he smiled faintly. "That's not how duty works." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, for saving us." Ethan nodded once and turned away. He didn't see her again. That evening, Ethan arrived at his small apartment. He dropped his bag by the door and sat down in silence. The walls were bare. No decorations, no reminders of service except a folded flag placed carefully on a shelf. He turned on the television. Every channel showed the same headline. "Mysterious passenger saves train during emergency." The video played again and again. Commentators speculated. Was he military? A former first responder? A trained professional? Ethan turned the TV off. He wasn't ready for attention. He had spent years learning how to disappear when the mission was over. But the world had other plans. The next morning, his phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Captain Reynolds, with the Department of Transportation," the voice said. "We'd like to speak with you regarding yesterday's incident." Ethan paused. "Am I in trouble?" There was a short laugh on the other end. Quite the opposite. 2 days later, Ethan sat in a quiet office across from transportation officials and safety investigators. They asked detailed questions. He answered calmly, precisely like every debrief he had ever given. At the end, one official leaned back. "You knew exactly what to do," he said. "Why?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Because panic spreads," he replied, "but calm spreads faster if someone starts it." The room went silent. Later that day, a reporter caught up to him outside. "Why didn't you tell anyone you were a soldier?" she asked. Ethan looked at the camera. Uncomfortable, but honest. "Because respect shouldn't depend on a uniform," he said. "It should depend on how we treat each other." The clip went viral. Veterans shared it. Teachers shared it. Parents showed it to their children. The story changed, no longer about a train emergency, but about character. That night, Ethan received a letter slid under his door. No return address. Inside was a simple note. "You reminded me why I joined the Army 20 years ago. Thank you for leading when it mattered." Ethan folded the note carefully. For the first time since leaving the service, he felt something he hadn't expected. Pride. Not in himself, but in what he still represented. And somewhere across the city, someone else watched the same video with very different emotions. Someone whose careless words had started it all. She realized something that night. Strength isn't loud. Honor doesn't announce itself. And heroes often sit quietly until the moment calls them forward. The morning after the incident, Ethan Walker tried to return to a normal routine. Coffee and quiet streets. Familiar apartment. Yet nothing felt the same. The world had begun to notice. His phone buzzed constantly, notifications, messages, missed calls. Social media feeds exploded with clips of the heroic moment on train 417. Comments poured in. Who is this man? Real hero. Disrespected but saved everyone. Ethan ignored them all. Fame was never his mission, but fame found him anyway. By midday, a local news station called. They requested an interview. He declined politely. Then the city mayor's office called, inviting him to a civic ceremony. Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to be a spectacle, but something inside nudged him forward. He realized he couldn't hide from this moment of inspiration. At the ceremony, the train passengers who had witnessed the event were invited. Families, children, and the very woman who had insulted him stood among them. The mayor began. Yesterday, the city witnessed bravery come under pressure, leadership in the face of chaos. One man reminded us all that true courage is not a title, it's action. Ethan stood quietly, hands folded, head down. The applause started low, then built into a thunderous wave. The woman approached, head bowed, her earlier arrogance replaced by humility. "I was wrong," she said softly. "I judged you without knowing you. I'm sorry." Ethan met her gaze calmly. "Thank you," he replied simply. "But there's nothing to apologize for. You weren't responsible for the fire. I just did my duty." As the ceremony continued, a young boy tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Are you really a soldier?" he asked, wide-eyed. Ethan knelt slightly. "Yes, sir. But today, anyone could have stepped up. I was just in the right place at the right time." The boy nodded, inspired. Later that evening, Ethan returned home, exhausted. He checked the news again. Interviews, op-eds, viral posts. His act of courage was being celebrated, shared, and discussed far beyond the city. But the most important lesson wasn't fame. It was the realization that simple acts of bravery can ripple through lives like waves on water. One act of calm, one decision to act with honor, could inspire countless people to rise to their own moments of courage. That night, as Ethan lay on his couch, he reflected quietly. All those years in the army had taught him one thing. Courage is about recognition, about responsibility. And now, people everywhere were learning that lesson, not from medals or titles, but from a single moment on a train. Unbeknownst to him, the woman who had insulted him that day made a personal vow to carry herself differently, to treat others with respect, and to think twice before judging anyone by appearances. Ethan had changed more than a train full of passengers. He had changed the mindset of people who would carry his example forward. And far go I. The world began to notice that real heroes don't seek credit. They create change quietly in moments of need. The attention did not fade. If anything, it grew stronger. Within days, Ethan Walker's name was known far beyond the city. News channels replayed the footage. Commentators debated leadership, courage, and respect. Schools showed the clip during morning assemblies. Veterans reached out, thanking him for representing them with dignity. Ethan watched it all from a distance. One afternoon, he received an official-looking envelope. Inside was a request from the Department of Transportation, not for praise, but for testimony. The investigation into the train incident required a formal review, and Ethan was asked to describe his actions under oath. He didn't hesitate. Truth never needed fear. The hearing room was smaller than a courtroom, but just as serious. Officials, attorneys, and safety experts filled the seats. Ethan sat calmly at the table, hands folded, eyes steady. One attorney spoke sharply. "Mr. Walker, you are not a licensed emergency responder. Why did you take control of the situation?" Ethan answered without emotion. "Because people were panicking. Someone had to lead." Another voice followed. "Do you believe your military training makes you superior in civilian emergencies?" Ethan lifted his head. "No," he said firmly. "It makes me responsible." The room fell quiet. He explained every step he took, how he identified the danger, how he assessed risk, how he prioritized lives over fear. No exaggeration, no hero language, just facts. By the end, even the most skeptical faces had softened. The lead investigator cleared his throat. "Your actions prevented serious injury, possibly worse. The department thanks you." Ethan nodded once. Outside the building, a small group of protesters had gathered. Signs read, Military should stay out of civil affairs and no special treatment. Ethan paused when he saw them. A reporter rushed toward him. "Do you think soldiers are being unfairly glorified?" she asked. Ethan considered the question carefully. "I don't believe in glorifying people," he said. "I believe in honoring actions. Anyone, soldier or civilian, can choose to do the right thing." The protesters grew quiet. Some lowered their signs. That evening, Ethan received a call from his former commanding officer. "You handled that with class," the officer said, "the same way you always did." Ethan smiled faintly. "I just tried to stay true to who I am." "Ever think about teaching?" the officer asked. "Leadership training?" "Crisis response. People listen to you." Ethan hadn't thought about the future in that way. After years of service, he had been drifting inshore where he belonged without a uniform. But for the first time, a new path appeared. Maybe his mission wasn't over. Maybe it had just changed. Late that night, Ethan stood on his balcony, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere below, trains ran safely through the darkness. People slept peacefully, unaware of how close danger had come and how quietly it had been stopped. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need applause. What he needed was purpose. And for the first time since leaving the army, he felt it clearly. Weeks passed, but the impact of that day on the train refused to fade. Ethan Walker's life slowly settled into a new rhythm. He began speaking at schools, community centers, and safety workshops, not as a hero, but as a teacher. He spoke about calm under pressure, about choosing responsibility over fear, and about respect as a daily decision. He always began the same way. "I'm not here because I'm special," he told audiences. "I'm here because anyone can lead if they choose to." People listened. Veterans saw themselves in him. Civilians saw possibility. One evening, after a small community talk, Ethan noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was the woman from the train. She waited until everyone else had left. "I wanted to thank you again," she said quietly. "But more than that, I wanted you to know something." Ethan nodded, giving her space. "I've changed," she continued. "That day showed me how quickly I judged someone without understanding them. I volunteer now. Ilisen mori. I speak less." Ethan smiled gently. "That means more than any apology." They stood in silence for a moment as strangers once divided by prejudice, now connected by growth. Later that night, Ethan received an invitation from a national veterans organization. They wanted him to help design a program teaching crisis leadership and character development for both veterans and civilians. Ethan accepted. For years, he had carried the weight of service quietly. Now, he realized his greatest contribution wasn't what he had done in uniform, but what he could still do without it. At one of his sessions, a young woman asked him, "What's the hardest thing you learned in the army?" Ethan paused. "Restraint," he said. "Knowing when not to react. When to stay calm. When to choose dignity over ego." The room was silent. "Respect," he added, "isn't demanded. It's earned through consistency, humility, and action." As his story continued to spread, something interesting happened. The conversation shifted. It wasn't about a train anymore. It wasn't about a soldier being insulted. It became about how society treats people it doesn't understand and how quickly that can change when character's revealed. Ethan never corrected people when they called him a hero. But in private, he wrote in his journal, "Heroes act once. Leaders act every day." One afternoon, Ethan boarded another train. Different city. Different faces. He sat down quietly, backpack at his feet, unnoticed. And that was exactly how he preferred it. Bat, tease time, something was different. People smiled at one another more. Someone offered a seat to an elderly man. A stranger helped a child with a drop toy. Small things, but meaningful. Ethan watched it all, heart full. Change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves silently like a train on steady tracks. Years later, the story of Train 417 was still told not as a viral headline, but as a lesson. Ethan Walker never became a celebrity. He turned down book deals, avoided constant interviews, and chose a quieter path. He worked as a leadership and crisis response instructor, helping people from all walks of life learn how to stay calm. When the world around them falls apart, his classroom had no trophies, no medals on the wall, only one sentence written on a board. Asterisk, asterisk, character is who you are when no one is watching. Asterisk, asterisk, one afternoon, Ethan stood at a train station, again older now, hair touched with gray. He watched people pass by. Commuters, students, parents, strangers sharing the same direction for a moment. A young man bumped into him accidentally. "Sorry," the man said quickly. Ethan smiled. "No problem." That small exchange reminded him of how far things had come. Nearby, a group of students whispered excitedly. One of them approached. "Excuse me," she said nervously. "Are you the man from the train?" Ethan paused, then nodded. "Yes?" Her eyes lit up. "My teacher told us your story. She said you taught people how to act when it matters most." Ethan thought carefully before replying. "I didn't teach anything," he said gently. "I just reminded people of what they already knew." That evening, Ethan received a letter from a young soldier overseas. Asterisk, sir. Asterisk. Asterisk. I was thinking about quitting. I felt invisible. Then I heard your story. You showed me that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. I stayed. Thank you. Asterisk. Ethan folded the letter slowly, emotion tightening his chest. That was the impact that mattered. Not recognition, not applause, but purpose passed forward. Across the country, policies changed. Crisis training improved. People spoke more about, respect about, not judging before understanding. And somewhere in a city classroom, a teacher told students, true heroes don't announce themselves. They show up when needed and walk away quietly. On the anniversary of the incident, Ethan returned to the same train line. He stood for a moment, watching the tracks stretch into the distance. He thought of the woman who had judged him and how she had grown. He thought of the passengers who had panicked and how they had followed calm leadership. He thought of the soldier who once felt lost and had found a new mission. Ethan placed his backpack on his shoulder and boarded the train. No one noticed. And that was the point, because the greatest legacy isn't being remembered. It's leaving the world better than you found it. The train doors closed, and a quiet hero moved forward, carrying honor not in his hands, but in his actions.